The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke. The fate of the Roanoke Colony, also known as the Lost Colony, has intrigued historians and archaeologists for over 400 years. This British settlement on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina, was founded in 1587 by John White and a group of 117 English colonists. White returned to England for supplies shortly thereafter, only to find upon his return 3 years later that the entire population of the colony had vanished without a trace. To this day, the disappearance of the Roanoke colonists remains one of history's most enduring unsolved mysteries. The origins of the Roanoke Colony. The Roanoke Colony was the second attempt by Sir Walter Raleigh to establish a permanent British settlement in North America. The first colony, founded on Roanoke Island in 1585, failed within a year due to dwindling supplies and rising tensions with local Native American tribes. Undeterred, Raleigh sent out a second expedition in 1587, led by John White and composed of 90 men, 17 women, and 11 children. This group of colonists would become known as the Lost Colonists. White's original plan was to settle the Chesapeake Bay area in present-day Virginia. But as fate would have it, the ship's captain insisted on leaving the colonists on Roanoke Island before heading north to plunder Spanish ships. Left with little choice, the colonists disembarked on Roanoke in July 1587. As governor of the new colony, White set about building housing and preparing the settlement for the long term. By late summer, with supplies running low, he decided to return to England for reinforcements and additional provisions, aiming to come back within 6 months. It would take far longer than he imagined. Upon arriving in England, White found the country on a war footing, with every ship and able-bodied man being drafted into service against the looming Spanish Armada. He was unable to secure passage back to Roanoke until the spring of 1590, nearly 3 years after leaving the colony. Sailing into Roanoke Harbor that August, White was stunned to find the settlement deserted, with no trace of its inhabitants other than the mysterious word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. The lost colonists had simply vanished. Theories on the fate of the lost colony. In the centuries since, dozens of theories have been put forth to explain what became of the 117 men, women, and children of Roanoke Island after White's departure in 1587. While certainly intriguing, most of these hypotheses lack conclusive evidence. The prevailing theories are massacre by local Native American tribes, relations with the nearby Sokotan, Croatoan, and Dassamongipunk tribes were already deteriorating when White set sail for England. Without adequate defenses or support from the mother country, the colonists could have been wiped out in an attack after White's departure. However, while plausible, there is no documented evidence of such an assault. Absorption by friendly Native American tribes. It has been posited that the colonists may have abandoned Roanoke, either voluntarily or through coercion, to live with friendly neighboring tribes like the Croatoan on nearby Hatteras Island. The Croatoan carving lends credence to this theory, as do later 17th century reports of lighter-skinned Native Americans in the region. Ultimately, there is no hard proof the lost colonists took refuge with native tribes. Starvation and disease, cut off from English supply lines and under constant threat of attack. The colony may have collapsed under the weight of dwindling food, unsanitary living conditions, and endemic disease. However, given the short time period between White's departure and return, this scenario lacks convincing evidence. Lost at sea, as a coastal settlement, the Roanoke colonists may have attempted an escape by boat, only to capsize and drown in the treacherous waters offshore. Adverse weather conditions or a lack of capable sailors could have doomed such an endeavor. Nonetheless, there is no material evidence to show the colonists met their end at sea. Spanish foul play. England's main rival for New World colonies could have captured or killed the Roanoke settlers to eliminate the British presence in North America. While Spanish agents were certainly active in the Americas, no documentation of an assault on Roanoke has ever been recovered. Regardless of what truly transpired at Roanoke after 1587, the outcome was undoubtedly tragic, cutting short the lives of 117 hopeful colonists and bringing a sudden end to Raleigh's dream of a permanent English settlement in the New World. The Lost Colony's disappearance also marked the collapse of Britain's first colonial ambitions in North America, setting back English colonization efforts for another 20 years. The search for answers at Roanoke, both during his initial return to the deserted colony and in the centuries since. Numerous expeditions have scoured Roanoke and the surrounding Outer Banks area looking for any clue to the colonists' fate. Yet, despite painstaking archaeological excavations and intensive study of records and artifacts, definitive evidence has remained frustratingly elusive. Notable searches and finds include White's return to Roanoke in 1590, which uncovered the abandoned colony and the carved Croatoan post, but no further indication of where the settlers went. A 1,600 expedition led by Bartholomew Gilbert, which found only the ruins of the original colony structures. Several small brass cannons reportedly left behind by the colonists were also recovered. John Lawson's 1701 journey to Roanoke, which reported findings of English artifacts and remains buried several feet down. These accounts sparked decades of digging at the site by various parties. A 1937 dig on Roanoke Island by a team from the University of North Carolina. They discovered fragments of English ceramics and tools, as well as part of a stone firearm ammunition storage building described by White. Excavations in the 1950s and 1962 by Ivor Noel Hume for the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. Hume found 16th century English objects consistent with Roanoke, but nothing to establish the fate of the lost colonists themselves. Underwater surveys near Roanoke Island since the 1980s have uncovered tantalizing 16th century artifacts, but further study failed to directly tie these items to the lost colony. Ongoing DNA research into ancestral ties between colonial-era Native American tribes and modern populations, aimed at finding genetic links between indigenous people and Roanoke colonists. But clear connections remain elusive. The most substantial physical remains related to the lost colony come from Site X on Roanoke Island. Identified in the 1990s as the original 1582nd colonial settlement built by White and his men, women, and children. Careful study of Site X's artifacts and structure remnants has yielded valuable information about the living conditions and activities of the Roanoke settlers. However, excavations at the site have yet to produce anything pointing definitively to the eventual fate that befell them. As with so much else related to Roanoke, definitive answers lie maddeningly out of reach. Enduring mysteries and theories. Despite generations of ongoing research and exploration, most of the key questions surrounding the lost colony remain frustratingly unresolved. There is still no firm consensus among historians on what truly happened to the 117 colonists after John White last saw them in 1587. A few of the most enduring mysteries about Roanoke include, what was the meaning or purpose behind carving Croatoan on the post? Was it a clue pointing to their destination, or intended as a more general reference to coastal Native American tribes in the area? Is there any truth to accounts in the mid-1600s claiming some coastal Carolina tribes showed evidence of mixed European ancestry and English cultural traits? Were they descendants of assimilated Roanoke colonists? What was found at the disturbances several feet underground at the original colony site, as reported by John Lawson? Did he unearth buried human remains, and if so, were they colonists or natives? What do the 16th century English artifacts found around Roanoke signify about day-to-day life in the lost colony before it vanished? What was the purpose behind the stone ammunition storage room dug into the earth? Could any of the underwater finds dated to the 1580s plausibly be tied back to the colonists, either lost in a shipwreck or deliberately thrown into the sea? Are further discoveries waiting to be made offshore? Was the demise of the colony gradual over 3 years, or shockingly sudden? Did all the colonists meet the same end, or could some have survived or escaped? Without substantially more evidence, definitive answers may remain beyond reach. In the absence of hard facts, speculation and folklore have rushed to fill the void. One prominent legend claims White's infant granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, was transformed into a white deer by the Native American tribes who adopted her. Another colorful but utterly unproven theory has the lost colonists turning pirate, hijacking a ship to the Caribbean. Whether the lost colonists survived and assimilated with native tribes, attempted to sail back to England, or all perished from violence, disease, or starvation, their ultimate fate continues to inspire wonder and speculation over 4 centuries later. The mysteries of Roanoke Island show no signs of giving up their secrets anytime soon. The fate of the lost colony remains one of early America's most intriguing unsolved mysteries. The legacy of the lost colony. While the 117 colonists of Roanoke disappeared, their tragic tale lived on to cast a long shadow over future English colonization attempts. In many ways, the demise of the lost colony represented both the peak and the collapse of Walter Raleigh's vision for building an English empire in the New World. News of the colony's catastrophic failure rattled the confidence of many in England who had hitherto urged the expansion of colonization efforts under Raleigh. As a result, it would be another 2 decades before London again approved any missions of settlement in North America. The Jamestown colony of 1607 is now considered the true lasting inception point for permanent British colonization in America. Raleigh himself stripped of his charter to establish colonies following the disaster at Roanoke, withered away the final years of his life imprisoned in the Tower of London before his execution. Though he never visited Roanoke Island himself, the lost colony came to symbolize his own spectacular rise and sudden ruin. For English colonists in America, Roanoke stood as a cautionary tale, reinforcing the existential dangers of trying to tame a wild, unfamiliar land. Jamestown settlers in particular were haunted by the specter of Roanoke's disappearance, as they clung desperately to survival in the early years of their colony. Tales of the lost colony motivated later generations of English settlers to avoid what they perceived as Roanoke's fatal flaws: poor planning, antagonistic relations with natives, and over-reliance on irregular supply ships from Europe. At the same time, the romantic tragedy of the lost colony made the early settlers into revered folk heroes who embodied the first seeds of English life in America. Accounts of White's granddaughter Virginia Dare persisted through the centuries in poetry and folk tales, which transformed her into a poignant symbol of lost innocence in the New World. The notion of a lost colony encapsulated both the incredible dangers and the transcendent possibilities that the Americas held in the English cultural imagination. While the ultimate lesson of Roanoke may have been how perilous and unpredictable colonization efforts could prove, the lost colony did finally pave the way for successful, large-scale English settlement in the wake of failures like Raleigh's. The impulse to explore and colonize North America could not be stifled, despite catastrophes like Roanoke. Just over 20 years later, foundations laid down by pioneers like Raleigh, White, and the much mythologized lost colonists would lead to permanent colonies in Jamestown and beyond that, cemented the English-speaking world's hold over the Americas. Though their lives ended in mystery and tragedy, the dream of an English America lived on, thanks to the doomed first settlers of Roanoke. The mysteries of Roanoke endure. More than 400 years later, the lost colony of Roanoke stands out as one of early American history's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. The total disappearance of 117 men, women, and children continues to captivate scholars, archaeologists, and the general public alike. The lack of definitive evidence regarding their fate only adds to the legend and allure of the colony's tragic end. Were the colonists slaughtered by natives, swallowed up by disease, lost at sea, or assimilated into local tribes? Or did some other, still unknown calamity befall them? We may never fully know why this promising English colony vanished so suddenly, leaving behind a single cryptic carving and a wealth of unanswered questions. Nevertheless, the mysteries of Roanoke endure as an early milestone in America's story and a compelling tale of the dawning challenges faced by England's first American colonists.